Hey guys, Sun here. I'm a technologist with an itch for privacy, and you're watching the Privacy Guides. In last episode, we went about setting up 1Pass, a great open source password manager, and I explained in perhaps way too much detail why using a password manager is an essential thing to do when you're using technology. I also mentioned why choosing a good master password is really key if you don't want all of your passwords to be vulnerable to hackers. And I mentioned that using a passphrase is a great way to have something that you can remember in your mind, but that ticks the boxes when it comes to what a great password should be. So if you haven't seen the video, I recommend going and looking at it. And if you have, or if you know your way around passwords and stuff, well, today's video is going to be about why I totally love 1Password when it comes to wanting a password manager that has all the security features we're looking for, but that also has great convenience features, such as making it really easier for you to enter passwords and synchronizing, and that's really the big one, synchronizing your passwords between your devices. Okay, so I have to admit first that 1Pass is open source, and I really favor open source peer-reviewed software versus proprietary stuff like 1Password, but there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum between total, convenience and total privacy and security. Open source, unfortunately, tends to be really on this side, so it's very secure, it's very private, but it really lacks convenience. And because of that, a lot of people decide to just not be safe and go to this other extreme. I think 1Password is one of those products where you're really closer to security, but still have a pretty decent amount of convenience. So yeah, 1Password, you guys made a great job at building this thing. So this video is not at all sponsored by 1Password, by the way, and I have tried Dashlane in the past. I've tried a few others, but really 1Password stands out because of, overall user experience and one killer feature, and I'm so excited to discuss this feature with you guys today, and that's local synchronization between your devices. So all of the mainstream password managers have something in common. They use a proprietary cloud to synchronize your passwords to the internet, and then from your devices, the devices themselves will pull that back up from the cloud, and that's how synchronization works. Now, I really don't like the idea conceptually that my passwords are leaving my devices and are going to the internet and are lying there in a database of passwords somewhere in the cloud. Yes, the passwords are encrypted on your devices before leaving for the cloud, but I still don't like the idea that the passwords are there somewhere in the cloud. And that's where 1Password stands out. They have a feature that allows you to synchronize your passwords using your local network, and those passwords are never sent over the internet, and that really makes me happy. So I want to share this with you. If you're already a 1Password user, you're probably going to want to skip this first part of installing 1Password, so I'll put a link in the description that will fast forward through this. But for those of you who have never used 1Password, you can go ahead and listen. And for those of you who do have a 1Password account, well, there might be a few tips that are worth your time. So let's jump in. Okay, so first things first, let's get started. So I'm an individual, so I want to go on the personal side, and I want to go ahead and try 1Password for 30 days. This will eventually cost you about $3 a month. Building great software such as 1Password takes an enormous amount of time and a great big team. I'm also a software developer. I have my own startup. I think that the $3 they're asking per month is extremely reasonable, so you should consider it. Okay, so what should we call you? Let's go ahead. John Doe, what's your email? Boom. Now, they want to make sure that I'm actually the owner of that email account, so give me a second. I'm fetching my email. Okay, so verification code is 495809. Enter. Okay. As this is a demo, we won't be adding a credit card right away, and it's time to choose a master password. So, okay, this video is a little confusing at parts. I'll try to break it down really clearly, but 1Password, in the same way as all other password managers, it wants you to use their cloud. And you're essentially paying for the software, but you're also paying for the cloud. We're not going to be using the cloud, but we still need to create a master password as if we were going to be using the cloud. So that password, consider it the same level of security that you're looking for than your Facebook account, your Google account, your Reddit account. So I'm going to go ahead and enter a password that I consider safe enough, but I would never use that to encrypt all of my passwords. So the one that I'm going to be entering here is, as you can see, it's not extremely long, but it uses pieces of words that do not exist in the dictionary. So it's actually pretty hard to hack that, but it's not long enough to encrypt all of your passwords. Now, once this is done, it will ask you to download an emergency kit to your file system. And if you guys are using Time Machine, and I highly recommend using Time Machine for backups, if you are, or if you want to, always make sure that you encrypt your backups. But the other thing that you have to know is by default, everything on your Mac will be backed up, and that's okay. But I find it really helpful to have specific folders that never synchronize to backups. That way, if a file is written there and I delete it, I know it's deleted everywhere. So to achieve this, if you go in System Preferences and you then go in Time Machine, you want to go in Options and you want to make sure that you have folders, and I highly recommend putting the Downloads folder there. So those are folders that will never be backed up, essentially. So I have Desktop and Downloads. So if that's done and I hit Download and it saves to the Download folder, well, I know that if I delete that once our setup is completed, it won't be in my backups. So that's super cool. Once we're here, I can hear you guys. A lot of you will freak out that I'm not enabling two-factor authentication, and I absolutely should. As I mentioned in my previous episode, you always should have a password manager and different passwords for all of your accounts, and you should always use two-factor authentication. But 2FA will be the subject of probably the next episode or the one after that. So for the purpose of today's video, I won't be enabling it, but you should absolutely do it. By the way, you should smash that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next video on 2FA. Okay, so let's get the apps. If I download 1Password for Mac and save it to my downloads folder, I can then go ahead and install it using the package installer. Everything here is cool. The defaults are pretty generic. Quit 1Password. Okay, not sure why it's asking me this, but I'm guessing, okay, by the way, I rehearsed for that video before, so I'm thinking I didn't delete 1Password before doing this run, but we'll suppose it was. So you won't have that window, it's just gonna go through like butter. I know I did delete all of my preferences, so I mean, for the purpose of this video, it's all gonna be cool. It now wants you to enter your master password. That's the 1Password account password. It's not the one that we'll use later to encrypt all your passwords locally. It's the one that you entered when you created the account. And once we're in, well, do you want to put it in the menu bar and have it in the background? Sure. So one of the features that stands out for me in using 1Password is I absolutely love this thing here. This allows you, wherever you are on your computer, to really quickly go here and copy a password. I mean, the UX of 1Password is just phenomenal. Okay, so let's go ahead and enable local sync. Okay, if you hit 1Password and you go into preferences and then you go into advanced, I love that feature. There's a way to allow creation of vaults outside of 1Password accounts. This is such a great feature. So this right now, we're entering your 1Password account password. This will absolutely look confusing to you because you'll be like, well, son, you said that we're not using that password to encrypt all of our passwords, but we're now creating a primary vault with that password. you're right, we'll be changing it in a second. So let's create it. And once this is done, you want to go in security and change it. And that master password is the password of the encrypted local vault. It's not the password of the account. They're going to be separate. So that's totally cool because you don't want them to be the same. So let's change it. And this is the one that's a little weaker here, as you can see by its length. And now I'm going to enter a passphrase. I'm going to enter the same one that I discussed in my previous episode on password managers. So it's something that uses, it's a passphrase, and it uses words that are not in the dictionary. And that's really great. So it's something that's at least 28 characters long. I think this is 32. And it's not something that you can crack using a dictionary attack. It's something that you would have to brute force. By the way, when you enter that password, you need to make sure that no cameras are recording you. So if you're in an internet cafe or you're at school or at the office and you just go about typing this, chances are a camera will have that password. And with that password, someone can get into all of your accounts. So I recommend using, this is going to look a little weird, but if you're in public, I recommend using a thermal blanket, okay, to cover you while you're typing your password. So to add a little bit of drama in this video, I'll show you what this looks like. Thermal blankets have amazing properties that will reflect your heat. So if someone is using an infrared camera to try to record what you're typing through a piece of cloth or something, it's really going to help. So what you want to do, and I'll put a link to this one. This one has a pretty good quality fabric. I'll put a link in the description, but what you want to do is you want to put it over you and over the keyboard, and then when you're typing your password, well, no one can see it. Now, hopefully I typed the same thing twice. Change password. Oh yeah, it needs a password hint. You never want to put a hint that actually makes any sense, right? And that goes for security questions online. That will be the subject of another video. Again, if you're into this stuff, smash that subscribe button. The one I tend to put is slow down. And the thing is, you always want to type those passwords so fast so no one will see it. If you're nervous like this, use the blanket, use the thermal blanket, man, that will do it. So slow down is my password hint. And now that this is done, that password there is in my mind. Nobody else knows it. So obviously, if I die, no one can access this. So the subject of an episode in the future, I don't know when, because that's a really complicated topic. We'll want to talk about how to allow others to perhaps have access to your passwords. How can you, the word I have in French is gestion de succession. I'm trying to find that word in English, but essentially, like, if you die, like, how can you, what's the word for this? Anyways, how can you pass your legacy on to your kids or to your wife or to your husband, to that person or people you love? So that will be the subject of another episode. It's a really complicated subject, but we'll keep it for a bit later. For the time being, if you really trust your spouse or something, you can give that password to that person and make sure that person enters it in their password manager and names it something that's totally unrelated to you. That way, if they get hacked, it's not easy to know that that was a password to your password manager. Once this is done, if you click on WLAN server, that's where we get to enable the WLAN server that we'll use to synchronize your passwords between your devices. Now, as we configured our firewall in a really effective way, that's actually the topic of the first episode of this series. You can go ahead and look at it. It's how to configure macOS for privacy. We discussed how to set up the firewall. So I'll go really quickly, I'll re-show you that little part. Okay, if you go in system preferences and you go in security and privacy and you unlock this. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, this is a really shitty password. I'm only using this because you guys are seeing it at the camera. And I unlock it and I go in firewall options. I am not automatically allowing built-in software or downloaded signed software to receive incoming connections. That's why this window popped up. And you also want to make sure you're in stealth mode. So because of that, I need to authorize all apps to be able to come in. In this specific case, I know that I'm installing a server on this computer that will be used to synchronize my passwords, and I trust 1Password, so I'll go ahead and allow it. Once this is done, I now need to switch to my iPhone. So let me start recording on my iPhone. Okay, let me see. Okay, so I'm now recording on my iPhone. So this is the window you get when you pop open 1Password for the first time. If you go to the bottom of that window, you'll see that there's a WLAN server thing. And this is always a little quirky here. I'm not sure. I guess it's some kind of a bug, but you have to kind of go out of 1Password and go in again. And once this is done, your computer will appear. If you click on it, it will ask you for the secret code. That's the code you have here on the computer. So let me type this in. Okay. By the way, that security code or secure code, I don't remember how it's called, that's what's used to make sure that the connection between your device and your computer is very well encrypted. And then you need to enter your master password, and that's the passphrase that we just created. So let's type that in. And we're in. Now it's going to ask us to autofill passwords. I never recommend using any autofill features, and I also don't recommend using browser extensions on the macOS side of things. I'll discuss this in a moment, so you want to go ahead and say done. Now it's going to ask you to use your fingerprint to unlock your passwords. I highly recommend never using biometrics for your password manager, your two-factor authentication app, or any crypto wallets you may have. You don't want that because, you want to use biometrics to get into your computer. That's something that you'll do like 100 million times a day. And the password that you chose for your computer is something you can type really quickly. That was one of the subjects in my first episode on macOS for privacy. So the password that I call the hardware password, the password to your iPhone or to your computer, that's something that doesn't need to be hardcore complicated. But the one that we chose, the passphrase we chose for your vault, that's something that's extremely complicated that only you know in your mind. So using biometrics means if ever I see you type the password to your computer, okay, and I then take a baseball bat and whack you on the head, I can take your face and unlock your iPhone with Face ID, or take your finger and unlock your password manager. So I only need to see that one password, and then I smack you on the head and I'm in. By the way, that kind of risk factor is called what we call OPSEC, operational security. That will be the subject of a few more videos in the future. So if you're into that, smash the subscribe button. But for now, we're going to make sure we never use Touch ID for the password manager. So now that we're in, if I click on favorite, let me see here. Oh, actually, that's quite interesting. Let me see on my Mac. I forgot a little step, but it's actually great because we'll see this. If I go in my personal vault, all of these are now on the cloud, or on the 1Password cloud. If I take them and I move them onto my Mac, that means I just removed them from the cloud and they're now on my Mac. And that's where we're going to be creating other accounts. So let's go ahead and just create one for Reddit. If I click on login, Reddit, whoops. And then if I go here and I type my John Doe and I go ahead and create a password, you always want to make sure that you use at least 28 characters long and 4 digits and 4 symbols. Once this is done, so I'm essentially guessing that you're like creating a Reddit account here, or you're changing your password for a more secure one. Once you hit save, we have a Reddit account. So it was created on my Mac. This account will never make its way to 1Password servers. It's actually stored locally on our computer. But how do we get it to appear here? Well, if you go in settings, now that we moved a few passwords over to the Mac side of things, they're no longer onto the cloud. If you go in sync and you sync now, okay, now if we go back to favorites, well, actually there's no favorites. If we go to categories, and you hit all items, there they are. So we have synced our passwords over the local network without ever having those passwords in an encrypted or not form leave to the internet. I mean, that's such great UX. That makes it very convenient for you guys to synchronize your passwords without them ever leaving your local network. So obviously this will work when your iPhone and your Mac are on the same Wi-Fi network. I wouldn't recommend doing this stuff when you're in an internet cafe or when you're at work. I recommend doing this only when you're at home because you trust the network more. That being said, it is encrypted using the security key or whatever it was called. Okay, so I'll stop the recording here on the iPhone because we're done. And a few last things. I mentioned earlier that I don't recommend using browser extensions. So if you go ahead and open Safari, hopefully we're going to get this little prompt here. Maybe we're not getting it because, as I mentioned, I rehearsed for this video. So, I mean, it would be asking us to install a browser extension. And what that browser extension does, you know it. You probably have a password manager already. I mean, it will automatically fill in your credentials when you go on a website such as Reddit or whatever else. You know, the thing is, if the website is compromised, it might fill the credentials in a box that you don't want to, and a lot of those password managers will actually trigger an enter key to like log you in automatically when you're on the login page, which means the technology could log you into a website that's trying to put together a phishing attack. So I always recommend doing this stuff by hand. The reason I absolutely love 1Password is this here and local sync. So if I want to have my Reddit password, I just have to type Reddit and I can copy the password. So let's say we go on reddit.com. I don't know why I'm doing this in Firefox, in Safari. Let's pop open Firefox. By the way, setting up Firefox for privacy is a subject of one of my previous episodes. You guys should look at that one. So if you go on reddit.com and you log in, right? I don't want to have a browser extension here that's going to do stuff like this. I much prefer clicking here, typing Reddit, copying the password, pasting it in, and then I just type John Doe. Obviously, I could have copied the username as well by clicking here, you know, and pasting it there, and then we log in. That's a fake account, so that won't work. But never use browser extensions. Never use autofill on iOS. That's a less secure approach. Okay, so I think we're pretty much done for this video. I mean, you now have, we can close this here. We now have a 1Password account in the cloud that we're never using, the one here. And we have all of our passwords on a local vault that's encrypted with a passphrase that's 38 characters long that someone cannot hack using a dictionary attack. We have amazing UX to like edit and create credentials. We have this marvelous little thing up here that allows us to really quickly go and copy a password. Yeah, so I'm pretty stoked about this. Now let me just really quickly check if we're missing anything in the preferences. So if I go in general, everything here is cool. Mini, that's totally fine. Security, lock after computer is ideal for 5 minutes. That's great. That will clear the clipboard, meaning once you copy a password within 90 seconds, it's going to be cleared. Account, that's cool. You still need to pay for an account if you want to be able to use the apps. So we're now in trial mode, so everything's cool. Watchtower is fine. I mean, it's going to check for compromised websites. It's going to tell you if a site was compromised, stuff like this. I'm going to check for two-factor authentication. The reason why is, as I mentioned earlier, I highly recommend having your 2FA app. Did I mention this earlier? Perhaps I haven't in this take, but so you always want two-factor authentication to run on a separate piece of hardware. So it can be an app on iOS, it can be a YubiKey. This will be the subject of one of my next episodes, so make sure you subscribe. That's going to be a really key one. In Vaults, we can see that we have our personal vault and our primary, which is actually on the computer. Vault for saving is now on primary by default. So it's never going to save to the cloud. It's going to save to your Mac, which is amazing. Okay, so require if you have 1Password and Safari or other web browsers. We don't need to enable this here. We don't need to enable that as well. As I said, I don't recommend using browser extensions. Yeah, now synchronize, that's what we did initially. Also sync primary vault with. We're not using those features, but as you can see, you can actually synchronize things over iCloud, Dropbox, or a folder. That's great, but we're using the wireless LAN or WLAN. I don't know why it's called, I guess it's wireless LAN, but whatever. And if we go into backups, we can go ahead and back up now. So the way that works is 1Password will create backups automatically on a regular basis, and it's going to write those encrypted backups to your file system. Those backups will be synced using Time Machine, but in another video, I'll explain how you can synchronize, not synchronize, but backup those backups onto a USB stick or something like this. I'm a huge fan of the Samsung bar. I don't know if this will focus here. I'm a huge fan of those little USB thumb drives. They're made out of, I think it's stainless steel, and they're water resistant, X-ray resistant. So in another episode, I'll discuss how to do backups really well. And in updates, well, you don't want an app to automatically install updates. That goes for any piece of technology. You want it to tell you when there's updates, but you don't want it to install updates. You want to have full control on the software you're running. And then in advanced, well, that's fine. We enable this. All of the rest is perfectly fine. So there you have it, guys. You now have a fully functional 1Password account that synchronizes your passwords between your devices using your local network. You're using a really robust master password to synchronize, not to synchronize, but to encrypt your local vault. And it's something that's usable, that's secure. Yeah, so I think I pretty much said it all. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, drop a comment or smash that like button, and I'll see you in the next video, next episode. God damn it, next episode.